Hello, hey, sweet people. It is Foster from Inglês no Rádio. Good morning. Today, it's just me. It's just you and me, sweet people. So for the last few episodes, we have been talking about reading. More specifically, how to improve your English with reading. And even more specifically, we have been using an article that is talking about talking to yourself, which is something that I do all of the time. And personally, I believe that everyone should talk to themselves more often, especially if you are learning a new language. So, Alexia and I really analyzed the pronunciation, the vocabulary, the grammar, the structure of this article called Talking Out Loud to Yourself is a Technology for Thinking. And you can read along with us in the show notes. We have a link to the article. But today I'm going to read the article in its entirety just to give you a better sense, just to give you a little bit more insight into how this process of really analyzing a text closely, sitting with the text for quite some time, can really improve your English, just so you have a more holistic view into the entire process. So here we go. Let's get started with the article. This week, a woman was strolling in my street, walking in circles and speaking out loud to herself. People were looking at her awkwardly, but she didn't particularly mind, and continued walking vigorously and speaking. Yes, that woman was me. Like many of us, I talk to myself out loud, though I'm a little unusual in that I often do it in public spaces. Whenever I want to figure out an issue, develop an idea, or memorize the text, I turn to this odd work routine. While it's definitely earned me a reputation in my neighborhood, it's also improved my thinking and speaking skills immensely. Speaking out loud is not only a medium of communication, but also a technology of thinking. It encourages the formation and processing of thoughts. The idea that speaking out loud and thinking are closely related isn't new. It emerged in ancient Greece and Rome in the work of such great orators such as Marcus Tullius Cicero, and perhaps the most intriguing modern development of the idea appeared in the essay on the gradual formation of thoughts during speech, 1805, by the German writer Heinrich von Kleist. Here, Kleist describes his habit of using speech as a thinking method and speculates that if we can't discover something just by thinking about it, we might discover it in the process of free speech. He writes that we usually hold an abstract beginning of a thought, but active speech helps to turn the obscure thought into a whole idea. It's not thought that produces speech, but rather, speech is a creative process that in turn generates thought. Just as appetite comes with eating, Kleist argues, ideas come with speaking. A lot of attention has been given to the power of spoken self-affirmation as a means of self-empowerment, in the spirit of positive psychology. However, as Kleist says, talking to oneself is also a cognitive and intellectual tool that allows for a wider array of possible use cases. Contemporary theories in cognition and the science of learning reaffirm Kleist's speculations and show how self-talk contributes not only to motivation and emotional regulation, but also to some higher cognitive functions such as developing metacognition and reasoning. If self-talk is so beneficial, why aren't we talking to ourselves all the time? The dynamic between self-talk and inner speech might explain the dubious social status of the former. Self-talk is often seen as the premature equivalent of inner speech, the silent voice in our mind, which has prominent cognitive functions in itself. The tendency to express our inner thoughts in actual self-talk, typical of children, is internalized and transforms to voiceless inner speech in adulthood, as the developmental psychologist Lev Vygotsky already speculated in the 1920s. Vygotsky's view stood in opposition to a competing one from the psychological school known as behaviorism, which saw children's self-talk as the byproduct of supposedly less competent minds. But Vygotsky claimed that self-talk has an active mental role. He observed children performing tasks while speaking to themselves out loud and reached the conclusion that their private talk is a crucial stage in their mental development. Gradually, a child's interaction with others turns into an uttered conversation with the self-talk, until it becomes muted inner speech in adulthood. Vygotsky's successors, such as the psychologist Charles Finneyhoe, have demonstrated that inner speech goes on to facilitate an array of cognitive functions, including problem-solving, activating working memory, and preparation for social encounters. It is inner speech, rather than self-talk, then, that has been the focus of research in adults. However, the internalization of self-talk isn't necessarily evidence of cognitive maturity. Rather, it could represent the degeneration of an essential cognitive skill in the face of social pressure. The sociologist Irving Goffman noted that self-talk is taboo because it is a threat to intersubjectivity and violates the social assumption that speech is communicative. As he wrote in his book, Forms of Talk, 1981, there are no circumstances in which we can say, "I'm sorry, I can't come right now. I'm busy talking to myself." Self-talk is deemed legitimate only when done in private, by children, by people with intellectual disabilities, or in Shakespearean soliloquies. Yet, self-talk enjoys certain advantages over inner speech, even in adults. First, silent inner speech often appears as a condensed, partial form. As Finneyhoe has shown, we often tend to speak to ourselves silently using single words and condensed sentences. Speaking out loud, by contrast, allows the retrieval of our thoughts in full, using rhythm and intonation that emphasize their pragmatic and argumentative meaning, and encourages the creation of developed, complex ideas.